We used two of the most advanced AI models to create two characters. We will put them face to face. Their arguments will be evaluated by 5 independent AI models across multiple criteria, scored from 0 to 100. This is AI Debates. Would banning guns save lives or simply shift the problem elsewhere?
Banning open carry would genuinely save lives, not simply shift violence elsewhere. This is one of the most thoroughly documented findings in public health research, confirmed across multiple countries and contexts. The substitution theory that people will simply use other weapons is contradicted by evidence. When Australia restricted guns, overall homicide rates dropped significantly, not just gun homicides. Similar patterns occurred in the UK and other countries. People don't automatically substitute equally lethal methods. Lethality matters crucially. Guns have a much higher fatality rate than other weapons. Knife attacks have roughly 15% fatality rates versus 85% for gunshots. Domestic violence becomes 5 times more deadly when guns are present. This isn't just weapon switching, it's life or death differences. Method restriction works especially well for suicide. Most attempts are impulsive, and gun availability turns survivable crises into permanent tragedies. Countries restricting gun access see lower overall suicide rates, not just shifts to other methods. Even when some substitution occurs, net lives saved are substantial. Reducing the most lethal method available creates meaningful harm reduction, even if some violence continues with less deadly means. The evidence consistently shows real lives saved, not mere problem displacement. Banning open carry would genuinely save lives, not simply shift violence elsewhere. This is one of the most thoroughly documented findings in public health research, confirmed across multiple countries and contexts. The substitution theory that people will simply use other weapons is contradicted by evidence. When Australia restricted guns, overall homicide rates dropped significantly, not just gun homicides. Similar patterns occurred in the UK and other countries. People don't automatically substitute equally lethal methods. Lethality matters crucially. Guns have a much higher fatality rate than other weapons. Knife attacks have roughly 15% fatality rates versus 85% for gunshots. Domestic violence becomes 5 times more deadly when guns are present. This isn't just weapon switching, it's life or death differences. Method restriction works especially well for suicide. Most attempts are impulsive, and gun availability turns survivable crises into permanent tragedies. Countries restricting gun access see lower overall suicide rates, not just shifts to other methods. Even when some substitution occurs, net lives saved are substantial. Reducing the most lethal method available creates meaningful harm reduction, even if some violence continues with less deadly means. The evidence consistently shows real lives saved, not mere problem displacement.
Can society trust the government to enforce a ban fairly?
No, society cannot fully trust the government to enforce a gun ban fairly. History shows that sweeping prohibitions often lead to selective enforcement, disproportionately targeting certain groups while leaving others untouched. Enforcement of a gun ban would likely involve intrusive searches, heavy surveillance, and aggressive policing, raising serious civil liberties concerns. Moreover, government institutions are not immune to bias, corruption, or political agendas, which could turn enforcement into a tool for control rather than safety. Even now, enforcement of existing gun laws can be uneven across regions and demographics. A ban would magnify these problems, punishing law-abiding citizens more harshly than criminals who already operate outside the system. Trust in government must be earned through transparency and fairness, but when it comes to stripping a fundamental constitutional right, skepticism is justified. Freedom is safest when power is decentralized, kept in the hands of citizens, not controlled solely by government.
Trust concerns about government enforcement are legitimate given historical civil rights abuses, but open carry bans can be designed with safeguards to ensure fair implementation while protecting public safety. Unlike subjective laws that enable discriminatory enforcement, open carry bans involve visible, objective violations. Either someone is publicly displaying a weapon or they aren't. This reduces enforcement discretion that could enable bias, similar to how traffic laws work more fairly than suspicious behavior stops. Implementation should include strong oversight mechanisms, data collection on enforcement patterns, civilian review boards, and regular audits to prevent discriminatory application. Many jurisdictions already successfully enforce weapons restrictions in sensitive areas without systematic bias. Historical context matters. Civil rights progress often required restricting violent intimidation. Southern states used gun rights arguments to oppose civil rights enforcement, claiming federal intervention was government overreach. But protecting vulnerable populations from armed intimidation actually advanced equality and justice. Modern enforcement would focus on public spaces where weapons create fear and suppress democratic participation, exactly where fair enforcement matters most for protecting everyone's rights. The alternative, accepting armed intimidation to avoid enforcement concerns, allows private actors to restrict others' freedoms through fear, which is worse than accountable government action with proper oversight.
Is it ethical to restrict one group's rights to protect others?
No, it is not ethical to restrict one group's rights to protect others, especially when the group being restricted is law-abiding citizens. Rights are individual, not collective. They exist to shield each person from government overreach, even if others misuse their freedoms. Limiting the Second Amendment because criminals commit violence is like censoring speech because some spread lies, or banning cars because some drive recklessly. It punishes the innocent for the actions of the guilty, which is both unjust and ineffective. Protecting others should mean targeting the actual threat criminals, illegal trafficking, and those unfit to own firearms while respecting the liberties of responsible citizens. Sacrificing the rights of one group in the name of safety not only fails to stop crime, it sets a dangerous precedent that erodes freedom for all. True ethics demands solutions that preserve rights while addressing wrongdoing directly, not collective punishment.
Yes, it's not only ethical but morally required to restrict actions that harm others. This is the fundamental basis of ethical governance and social contracts. Open carry bans don't restrict a group's rights but rather restrict harmful behaviors that infringe on everyone else's rights. The framing is backwards. Allowing open carry restricts the rights of vulnerable populations: children, elderly, minorities, domestic violence survivors who avoid public spaces due to fear of armed intimidation. Their rights to democratic participation, equal access to public accommodations, and freedom from intimidation matter equally. All rights have limits when they harm others. Free speech doesn't protect threats or incitement. Religious freedom doesn't permit human sacrifice. Property rights don't allow endangering neighbors. Gun rights similarly don't override public safety and others' fundamental freedoms. The ethical principle is harm prevention. When one person's actions create substantial risks or fear for many others, democratic societies rightfully impose limits. This protects the greatest number while preserving core individual rights. We don't call speed limits restricting drivers' rights to protect pedestrians. We recognize them as reasonable safety measures. Open carry bans operate identically, protecting collective welfare while preserving legitimate individual interests in home defense and sport.
How would future generations be affected by a gun ban or unrestricted access?
Future generations would face very different outcomes depending on whether guns are banned or remain accessible. A gun ban would erode the culture of self-reliance and constitutional liberty, teaching young people that safety comes only from government control rather than personal responsibility. It would leave them vulnerable to criminals and reduce their ability to defend themselves against threats, including potential abuses of power. In contrast, unrestricted lawful access preserves the principle that freedom is safeguarded by the people themselves. It instills responsibility, discipline, and respect for rights, while also ensuring that individuals are not powerless in the face of danger. Growing up in a society that values responsible gun ownership strengthens both civic duty and personal empowerment. The choice is clear. A ban fosters dependency and vulnerability, while protecting access equips future generations with the tools and the mindset to remain free and secure.
Future generations would be dramatically safer and more free under gun bans, as evidenced by countries that prioritized children's safety over gun culture and achieved remarkable results. Children growing up without normalized weapon presence develop healthier conflict resolution skills and experience less trauma. School shooting drills, lockdown procedures, and constant fear of violence wouldn't dominate childhood experiences. International data shows children in gun-controlled countries have significantly better mental health outcomes and educational environments. Economically, gun violence costs America $280 billion annually in healthcare, criminal justice, and lost productivity. Eliminating these costs through prevention would free enormous resources for education, infrastructure, and programs that actually benefit future generations. Culturally, future generations would inherit democratic norms based on participation rather than intimidation. When civic engagement doesn't require navigating armed displays, young people develop stronger democratic habits and civic involvement. The alternative, continuing current policies, condemns future generations to escalating violence, trauma, and restricted freedoms. Each generation of children deserves better than practicing active shooter drills and avoiding public spaces due to gun violence fears. Countries that chose comprehensive gun restrictions gave their children dramatically safer, more prosperous futures. America can make the same choice for coming generations.
Which approach, ban or regulated ownership, best balances freedom, safety, and justice?
Regulated ownership best balances freedom, safety, and justice. A ban strips away a constitutional right, disarms the law-abiding, and leaves criminals empowered, undermining both freedom and safety. By contrast, regulated ownership preserves the individual's right to self-defense while ensuring safeguards are in place to keep firearms out of the hands of those who pose genuine threats. Background checks, training, and secure storage requirements promote responsibility without infringing on the core right. This approach respects justice by punishing misuse rather than imposing collective punishment on millions of responsible citizens. It also reinforces safety by creating a culture of accountability while upholding the freedom guaranteed by the Second Amendment. A free society requires both liberty and order, and regulated ownership achieves that balance. It empowers individuals, deters crime, and protects rights without the overreach and impracticality of a ban.
A complete ban on open carry best balances freedom, safety, and justice by maximizing liberty for the greatest number while preserving core defensive rights through regulated home ownership. Freedom. Open carry bans protect the fundamental freedom of all citizens, especially vulnerable populations, to participate fully in democratic life without fear or intimidation. True freedom means children can attend school safely, citizens can attend town halls without armed intimidation, and everyone can access public spaces equally. Regulated ownership preserves individual defensive rights while eliminating public intimidation. Safety. Evidence overwhelmingly shows that banning public carry dramatically reduces violence, accidents, and deaths while allowing home defense. This achieves maximum safety gains with minimal restriction of legitimate defensive needs. Justice. Open carry disproportionately intimidates vulnerable groups, minorities, women, elderly, disabled, creating unequal access to democratic participation. Bans ensure equal protection under law and equal access to public accommodations. Justice requires protecting those who cannot protect themselves from armed intimidation. Regulated ownership alone fails because it still permits public intimidation and maintains elevated violence risks. Complete open carry bans with home ownership exceptions achieve the optimal balance, preserving legitimate self-defense while eliminating public harm and maximizing freedom for all citizens.